The Last Kingdom gave us one of the most compelling versions of Alfred the Great ever put on screen. David Dawson's performance was nuanced, intelligent, and deeply human. But here's the thing, the real Alfred the Great made the show's version look like a Sunday school teacher. The actual historical Alfred was a man who could barely stand up from illness on some days, and on other days he was ordering blood eagle-level brutality against his enemies. The show softened him a lot. And there's one detail in particular that they got so wrong, it essentially flipped a massive part of his character completely on its head. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you will never watch The Last Kingdom the same way again. So let's start with what the show gives us. In The Last Kingdom, Alfred is portrayed as a deeply pious, cerebral, sometimes frustratingly strategic king. He's the chess player. He's the man who sees 10 moves ahead, while Uhtred is busy swinging his sword at whatever is directly in front of him. And honestly, David Dawson nailed that energy. His Alfred is calculating. He's frail, he's deeply religious. He coughs a lot, he prays a lot. He manipulates Uhtred over and over again, but always with this sense that he's doing it for the greater good, for his dream of a united England. The show also gives us an Alfred who struggles with his health. We see him wincing in pain, we see him bedridden at times. We know something is wrong with his body, though the show keeps it somewhat vague. There are references to a mysterious illness, a chronic condition that plagues him throughout the series. And the show uses this illness beautifully as a dramatic device. It makes Alfred seem vulnerable, human, a king who could be toppled not by a Danish axe, but by his own failing body. But here's where things start to diverge from history. Because the show's version of Alfred's illness is honestly the watered-down, TV-friendly version. The reality was so much worse. The historical Alfred the Great suffered from a debilitating chronic illness that historians have debated for centuries. Bishop Asser, who wrote a biography of Alfred during the king's own lifetime, described his condition in painful detail. Alfred apparently suffered from severe abdominal pain, possibly Crohn's disease, though some historians have suggested it might have been intestinal parasites, hemorrhoids so severe they were debilitating, or even a chronic inflammatory condition that we still can't fully diagnose from medieval descriptions. What we do know is that this wasn't just occasional discomfort. Asser describes Alfred as being in almost constant agony for years. There were periods where he could barely eat. There were times when the pain was so severe that he would pray for death, and I mean that literally. According to Asser, a young Alfred actually prayed to God to replace one illness with another, something that would be less visible to his court because he was terrified that his original condition was making him appear weak in front of his nobles. Think about that for a second. This man was so aware of the political optics of his illness that he literally asked God to swap his diseases around. And according to Asser, God answered that prayer, but the replacement illness was arguably worse. He traded visible symptoms for invisible internal torment. The show hints at this, but it never really goes there. TV Alfred is sick, yes, but he's functional sick. He's dramatically cough into a handkerchief sick. The real Alfred was sometimes doubled over in agony, unable to attend feasts, unable to ride, barely able to govern during his worst episodes. And yet, he still managed to be one of the most effective military and political leaders in English history. That contrast between his physical frailty and his iron will is honestly more dramatic than anything the show invented. Now here's where things get really interesting and where the show starts to seriously diverge from history. Because The Last Kingdom presents Alfred as a man who prefers diplomacy, strategy, and faith over violence. He's the reluctant warrior. He fights when he has to, but he'd rather convert the Danes than kill them. He wants peace through Christianity, through law, through civilization. And look, there is some truth in that. Alfred was a lawgiver. He did create a legal code. He did promote education and literacy. He did try to build a more organized, more Christian kingdom. All of that is historically accurate. But the show conveniently leaves out the fact that Alfred was also absolutely ruthless when the situation called for it. After the Battle of Edington in 878, which the show does depict, Alfred didn't just politely ask Guthrum to convert to Christianity. He starved the entire Danish army into submission through a brutal siege. He cut off their supplies and waited while they slowly weakened. And when Guthrum finally surrendered, the baptism wasn't some gentle spiritual awakening. It was a political humiliation, a public demonstration that Alfred's god had triumphed over the Norse gods. But that's not even the savage part. Throughout his reign, Alfred dealt with traitors and oath-breakers with a level of brutality that the show never touches. He had people executed in ways that were standard for the period, but would make modern audiences deeply uncomfortable. He wasn't just hanging people. Historical records suggest punishments including blinding, mutilation, and the execution of hostages, including women and children in some cases when treaties were broken. Alfred also built his famous network of fortified towns, called burhs, and the way he funded and manned them was through a system that was essentially compulsory military service. If you didn't show up when called, you could lose everything: your land, your status, your freedom. Alfred's England wasn't a gentle place. It was a kingdom under constant existential threat, and he governed it with an iron fist wrapped in a Bible. The show gives us a king who is stern but fair, pious but pragmatic. The real Alfred was all of that, but he was also capable of genuine cruelty when he believed it served his kingdom's survival. He was a medieval king, and he acted like one. So what's the one detail they got very wrong? It's this. The Last Kingdom portrays Alfred as a man who is reluctantly dragged into warfare, who sees combat as a necessary evil, who would rather be in a monastery studying Latin texts. The show frames his military genius as almost accidental, a byproduct of his intellectual mind being forced to deal with practical problems. The real Alfred was a warrior from childhood. He loved military strategy not as an unfortunate necessity, but as a genuine passion. He personally redesigned the English Navy, creating ships that were larger and faster than the Viking longships. He didn't delegate this. He was hands-on. He personally oversaw the design of these vessels according to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, and his new ships were described as being twice as long as the Danish ones. He restructured the entire military system of his kingdom. He divided the Fyrd, the Anglo-Saxon militia, into two rotating halves so that there would always be a standing force ready to fight while the other half was home farming. This was revolutionary. This wasn't a reluctant scholar stumbling into military reform. This was a man who was obsessed with the problem of defense and threw his considerable intellect into solving it. Alfred didn't just fight the Danes when they came to him, he launched offensive campaigns. He sent his forces into East Anglia and Northumbria. He besieged Danish-held towns. He was proactive, aggressive, and strategic in a way that the show only occasionally hints at. The Last Kingdom wants you to believe that Uhtred is the warrior and Alfred is the thinker. In reality, Alfred was both. He was a sick, suffering, deeply religious man who also happened to be one of the most innovative military minds of the early medieval period. The show split him in two, giving his martial prowess to Uhtred and leaving Alfred with only the piety and the politics. And in doing so, they actually made him less impressive than the real man. Now, I don't want to be completely unfair to the Last Kingdom, because it does get a lot right. The broad strokes of Alfred's story are accurate. His survival during the Danish invasions, his eventual victory, his dream of a united England, his emphasis on education and law, all of that tracks with the historical record. The show captures his intelligence, his political cunning, and his genuine vision for what England could become. David Dawson's portrayal also captures something essential about Alfred, that tension between his human frailty and his superhuman ambition. The real Alfred felt that tension every single day, and the show communicates that beautifully, even if it softens the extremes on both ends. The relationship between Alfred and the Danes is also more nuanced in the show than you might expect. While Uhtred is fictional, the dynamic he represents, Saxons and Danes learning to coexist, fighting each other and alongside each other, that's historically grounded. Alfred's England was not a purely Saxon kingdom. It absorbed Danish settlers, Danish customs, and Danish words into its culture, even as it fought Danish armies. So the next time you watch The Last Kingdom and see Alfred coughing into his sleeve while reluctantly sending men to war, remember this: the real Alfred was likely in far worse physical condition than that, and he was also far more eager to fight than the show lets on. He was a walking contradiction, a man who could barely digest his food, but who personally redesigned warships. A man who prayed for hours every day, but who also ordered the execution of hostages without blinking. The show gave us a great character. History gave us an even greater one. If you found this video interesting, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. We dive deep into the history behind your favorite shows every single week, and trust me, the real stories are almost always wilder than fiction. Drop a comment below telling me what you think. Was The Last Kingdom's Alfred better than the real one, or does history win this round? And if there's another character from the show you want me to break down, let me know. I read every comment. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.